I have an interesting question for you. How do you know when you are awakened? I'll give you the simplest answer that I can think of. Precisely when the concept of being awakened is no longer applicable to you. The reason for this is because being awakened is a concept. I know this is something that many different spiritual traditions do not care to admit, especially when they talk about enlightenment, moksha, merging with the Tao, whatever different kind of view it is. They may not want to admit this, and some do, which I think is great. But these are all concepts, right? Who is it that is trying to be awakened? Who is it that is not awakened? Who is it that is going through the process of awakening? Until you can see that these are all just constructions of the mind trying to problem solve what it is you are working through, until you realize this, you're going to be caught in this illusion of I am not awakened, I need to be awakened, I'm not enlightened, I need to be enlightened. Until you can see past this view and realize that even the terms awakening, not awakening, until you realize that these are not applicable to the ultimate reality, the true nature of what you are, you're going to be lost in those views. Now, I've done a previous few videos on views, and it's the same argument here. Any kind of view, no matter how seductive or how long it's been around, any kind of view is going to occlude your ability to realize what you need to find an end from psychological suffering. I can't make it any clearer than that. The reason why is because every view originates from psychological functions, which are all the basis that forms conventional reality. So, to the extent that you think, I'm not awakened, I need to be awakened, I need to put myself through arduous practices, I need to torture my body, I need to sit in isolation, I need to go through ascetic practices. To the extent that you buy into and believe these things, you are further pulling yourself away from the truth because you are putting yourself through goal-oriented actions towards quiescing the mind. And again, we're trying to talk about seeing past the mind, seeing past the limitations of our own psychological functioning. Every single one of those practices gets you caught in psychological suffering. It gets you caught in workings of the mind. Seeing someone who can think of a personal example here, but seeing someone who has been practicing ascetic methods, sitting in meditation for years and years, thinking that I just need to train a little bit longer and a little bit harder to find this end. They're playing a game with themselves, whether they realize it or not. I know this is a cold, hard truth, but it needs to be said because it causes so much undue suffering. Imagine for someone who's been sitting 20, 30 years, maybe their whole life, sitting and trying to find enlightenment when all they needed to realize was that their methodology, their approach, their belief system was wrong. Imagine how much time and how much suffering and hardship could have been saved by just teaching this simple truth. We need to see past all the different things our mind constructs for us. Now again, our mind is not bad. Our mind is just doing what it has been conditioned to do through the functions of evolution. It problem solves for us. It tries to find ways to navigate our environment towards goal-directed activity. When you set your goal-directed activity as awakening or enlightenment, you are not only creating this belief of what awakening and enlightenment is, you are also buying into this belief to the extent that you are shaping your own behaviors towards figuring out an answer to this question that your mind has constructed. What actually needs to be done is quite the opposite. We don't need to work really hard to problem solve this. We need to let go of the notion of problem solving in general. Again, seeing past the limitations of the mind and conventional reality as our psychological functions construct them. It's really, really difficult to understand this until you have been through it yourself. Oftentimes, the way we break out from this type of way of thinking is through insight-based practices or using different psychological functions. We suddenly get this insight and this realization that the approaches we've been taking from before, the things we've been trying in the past, they're fruitless. They don't work. You see this in many different spiritual teachings. Buddhism, for example, talks about the middle way, getting away from ascetic practices, getting away from indulgent pleasures, finding this middle ground, not being attached to either side, being able to experience aspects of both sides, but not being attached to them. This is the exact same thing with awakening, enlightenment, and all those different terms. They are all pointing to an ultimate reality, a place, again, place is not the right word, but I'll use it here, a place where we can find freedom from psychological suffering through deconditioning what it is that causes psychological suffering, which are functions of the mind and our psychological functioning in general when incorrectly used and incorrectly adhered to. This is why, I'll say it again here, this is why believing that you need to be awakened or believing that you need to be enlightened or believing that there are awakened or enlightened beings and you are not, this is why all those different views and beliefs lead to psychological suffering. These are all sham terms in the sense that when you adhere to them, you are going to get further lost as opposed to closer to what it is you are trying to realize. Now, the reason I use the term awakening is because you have to use some kind of word and description to get across what it is you are pointing at. When I use terms like awakening, ultimate reality, conventional reality, objective reality, psychological functions, these are all signs. They are signs that are pointing you, hopefully pointing you, in the right direction. They should not be accepted at face value for what they are. I don't want you to accept anything I say or anything anyone says until you have validated for yourself, when you have gone through and fully realized what it is that is being spoken about. Someone who takes that approach, they will see as well that everything I'm talking about, they're also pointers in the same way that other spiritual practices are pointers. You cannot turn to any single spiritual practice, Buddhist teachings, Taoist teachings, Hindu teachings of any branch or any kind, Shinto, anything. You cannot turn to those and say this is the definitive truth itself. It's not. No matter what people say to you, it is not. They are all pointers to something that goes beyond what our psychological functions can know from an intellectual sense. However, we can realize what it is that is being pointed to. This is exactly what I want you to do as well for awakening and enlightenment. Let go of these terms. Forget about them. When you go through the practices, you will see that there is no one, no thing to be enlightened or awakened or not enlightened or not awakened. Those are all based in impermanent things. When you believe in that separate sense of self, then you identify that separate sense of self as being awakened or not awakened. When you see past sense of self, when you see past these notions and dualities, then all of those things dissolve, and the entire concept of awakened and unawakened becomes a moot point. It becomes something that you realize is just your mind's way of trying to convey and help you with what it is you are seeking. But the ironic part is that, and I should say this as well, there is an end to this path. It's not an endless path. You can find an end to psychological suffering. The ironic part is that when you come to this end and you make this full realization that stays with you and is not a passing or fleeting insight, you realize that the entire question and the entire journey to begin with was kind of pointless, other than making that realization for yourself. It was kind of pointless because you were setting up this quest, you were setting up a problem to solve for yourself. Again, problem solving abilities are great for certain capabilities and certain things in life. But in terms of mental health, we know it doesn't work very well. We know it doesn't work to try and reduce our psychological functions, our mental health. We know it doesn't work because aspects of mental health, the first person experience, they're not reducible in the same way that we can manipulate or navigate our own environment. So again, main takeaway here, awakening, enlightenment, you may use them as pointers, but you should not attach to them. And most importantly, you should validate everything that is being said or being learned by whoever it is, whether it's me or someone else. Do not buy into these concepts or beliefs or perspectives. Do not buy into anything until you have validated for yourself. You may use them as generative hypotheses, but don't get lost in this idea of I'm not awakened and I need to be awakened. It will lead to psychological suffering.